I am here with Ossie Jordan, Chairperson on the Water Commission. I've been trying to learn as much as I can about the water situation in Brockton. So I'm hoping you can help me understand more of what's involved with the water supply.
Well, our main part of our water supply comes out of Silver Lake, which is over in the Pembroke area. Back in, I believe it was 1899, the state allowed the city of Brockton to buy the lake itself in a certain amount of land around the lake. Now, it's a very small amount, probably about 10, 15, 20 feet around the lake to kind of protect it from anything going in, etc. So we, the city of Brockton, own the Silver Lake. They erected a transmittal system, which is a water system, from there back here to Brockton, and that's been in operation since then. We do have pumping stations along the line to ensure that the water is kept at the pressure that we need. We also have stations to clean the water, and I won't go into that because I don't think that's been a problem per se, more of the water itself. We have not had a problem with the lake as far as the amount of water in it. We do certain things to try to keep that up at a certain level. The lowest it was in recent years was back in '88, and that was the very lowest it was. And then a couple of times since then when we've had drought, including about 2 years ago, where it was its next lowest amount. But again, there was never a threat for the city's water supply at that point in time.
Are those pictures on, the Montauk Road place where the commission meets? Those pictures on the wall of Silver Lake, are those pictures from 1988?
Right, those are the ones showing the lowest, where you can actually see a lot of land that the lake now is, of course, covering up because it's back pretty much to full again. Although we just came through a drought, and we've had, lucky enough, some remnants of some tropical storms that have come through the area, and we're pretty close to full. Now, I don't know the very latest. I did not check, which I should have this morning before I left. But we're pretty close to full at this point as far as the amount of water that's in the lake. This is a time of year from now until roughly May that as long as we have normal rain and a normal amount of snow for this area, that we usually don't have a problem for the
So you divert water from east and west Monpont into Silver Lake when it's necessary, or Silver Lake goes into east and west Monpont?
Actually, we divert from the Monpont west and east ponds if needed. Usually from mid-May through September, we don't divert at all. That's one of the times that we, even if we need water, we really don't divert, because among other things, if we're having trouble, so are they, and the pipes that we would need to draw the water from would probably be below the level that we could actually pull water from those two ponds.
Now, which one of those Monpont ponds is having trouble with the algae?
West has had the most trouble with it. That goes back for probably over 100 years. Part of it is cranberry bogs. Part of it is at the early part of mid-century, I'd say in the 40s, 50s, when people had either homes or recreational places along, say, West Monpont, which later in the 50s, 60s, 70s on up to now 2017 and almost into 18 have turned into permanent homes. At that time, if they were using those places with some kind of washing equipment for like laundry, the phosphorus in the laundry was a detrimental, one of the detrimental things. There are cranberry bogs all in that area, and the other part would be the fertilizers that they were using at that point in time, which is another piece. There might have been some light industry, because almost throughout all of Southeast Mass, where there was water, you usually found industry using that water to help process whatever they were making. Leather, iron, all kinds of products were being made, and they weren't as careful back then as they are now, nor did they have the number of laws, ordinances, and other restrictions to ensure that the water be kept clean. So there was a lot of straight dumping of products at that point, including the normal waste materials from bathrooms at the time. The pipes went straight into the lakes and ponds, and all that has changed, and one can no longer do that at all.
So the other water supplies are, one of them's right behind us, DW Reservoir, DW Field Park Reservoir. The desalination plant is supplying about 2 million gallons of water per day still.
It has been doing it for about a month and a half, and we do that this time of year and try to do it during the winter to offset the amount of water that we take out of the lake. That leaves that much water that we don't use for the summertime, when we know we have generally less water coming as far as rain's concerned, and that way we're not drawing from the lake itself as much. Yes, we draw all the time, but whatever we take from the aquaria would lessen that amount coming out of the lake itself. So that's one of the things that we do to try to help keep the lake at its highest level.
So this place, the desal Silver Lake, and some tanks, right? Is that
Yeah, we have a
pretty
number
much
of
it?
tanks that we fill up just about every night, overnight. So while folks are sleeping, those tanks are filling up during the day. The tanks mainly around the city are in positions to help with the pressure and having water at extreme ends of the city, because again, it's coming in from one point, and as you're drawing off the line, so where it enters the city, that water is extremely high pressure, and then when you get up at far ends, like where I live up in Ward 6, so up at that end going towards Abington, the pressure is still good, it's very good, but it's not as forceful as it would be down the far end of the city, down the south side.
So how long have you been the chairperson?
This is my third term, I believe. So let's see, 1, 2, 3. So that'd be 9 years, and I've been on that commission. I forget when I started. It seems like forever, but I've been involved with the water off and on, whether I was on the commission or not. I'd say from the late 90s, 97, 98. Attending meetings, general meetings, and learning about what was going on, etc.
So since you've started, what would you say the water usage was when you started compared to what it is now?
The usage itself was higher. We were probably up around 12, maybe even 13 million gallons a day. At that time, the Brockton Department of Public Works had money enough in its general account to go in and correct leakage and improve upon the pipes, of which some are over 100 years old within the city of Brockton. So by replacing the pipes, that helps, because you have now a full usage diameter within the pipe. A pipe, say, is the size I'm using my fingers now. If this is a, I don't know, 4-inch pipe or what have you, and then 25 years later it's like that, another 25 years it's like that. So even though it may be a large pipe in its true diameter, the minerals that build up on the inside, we have that same problem with our teeth for most people. As you eat food, etc., drink liquids, you have a buildup on your teeth, which you hopefully go clean daily, but you also go to the dentist to have clean a few times a year. Well, the pipes have a similar kind of thing. They build up minerals on it, and once in a while we can go in and clean that, but it gets to a point that you actually have to replace the pipes, and we did a lot of that up through, I'd say, the early 2000s, maybe 2003, 4. And at that point, we were no longer receiving enough money to go ahead and replace X amount of pipe during the year. The other thing we were doing, where some areas had a smaller diameter, since more housing had been put in those areas, we increased the size of the pipe, which increased the flow and improved those residents in the city to do that. Just a side piece, we are restricted, like all cities and towns in the state and federal government for that matter, that at certain times of the year you're not to do major construction, at least in this part of the country, because of the way the ground freezes and the effect that has on construction and other things. So you have a short window to really, during the year, to do the kind of construction. Yes, we do emergency, and we have to do that. If a pipe breaks, what have you, you've got to go in and fix that immediately. So we are allowed to do that. But to do real construction and replacing pipe at that point, no, that stops usually sometime in November.
So what would you say, like, since you've been on the Water Commission, the range of emergency expenses and normal maintenance of a year?
The emergency one, we never know. And again, there's a lot of different things that contribute to that. If we had a major fire going on in the city, that takes a lot of pressure. The water department then increases, if it's a multiple alarm, the pressure for the water. By doing that, if enough of that is not pulled off by the fire companies when they're fighting the fire, you're now putting pressure on the system. So that could cause a problem. It may not do anything that day. It may be a week later before that starts really showing up. It might start as a small drip somewhere along the line, and eventually it opens up and keeps going to the point that we then have a burst and we have a gusher in some place in the city, and we have to fix that. Like I said earlier, we've done as much pipe detection that we can to really slow the water down as far as leakage. So we went from that roughly 13 million down to around 10 million per day gallons. So we've done a great job doing that. The problem becomes appropriation of money to be able to do that. When we had the problems with the houses being taken, we had fewer amounts of dollars coming into the city through taxes. So again, that slowed the amount of money coming in, and that still doesn't reduce the use of services. Yes, there might have been fewer people in the city, but it wasn't a water problem. But as far as operating, whatever, all the different police, fire, schools, education department, like that, schools, the cemeteries, the streets, the plowing, everything that the city does is all still needed at that point in time. And if the money isn't coming in, then you've got to somehow cut, and cuts hurt when you're trying to keep up on things. Those of us that own homes, those of us that have cars, you cannot drive the car for 10 years and not do any work to it. You can't drive it a year without doing any work, changing oil, brakes, starter might go. These things don't run forever. A house, you paint it now, in 5 years or 10 years you got to paint it again. These are things that go on in your house. You have a rug on the floor, so many years before you have to replace it. Painting your walls in your house. After a while, it's time to change that. So this is the same thing. It's called infrastructure within the city, and those things have to be replaced, and we forget it. It costs money, okay? And that's one thing we have to do on a consistent basis. If we don't do it, and then that's when we have major problems.
So do you happen to know what the budget was? Like, do they have an emergency fund set aside?
Yeah, we keep a certain amount of money for emergencies on a yearly basis, and that is basically for pipe breaks, those kinds of things. It's winters have a big effect on it. The last couple of winters have been mild. I go by how I have to use my snowblower. I only had to use it twice in the last 2 years, There's other years I had to use it constantly. We had that about, I think it was about 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, when all the roofs had extra snow on it. It's not so much the snow, it's more the temperature. So that if we have a freeze that goes deep into the soil, that's going to affect the pipes more than snow. Actually, we welcome the snow because when it melts, if it does melt at a slow level, that's going to fill all our water retainers, across the whole state, not just down
The aquifers.
here. Right.
So one of the things I don't know much about right now, I'm gonna start trying to understand it better, is I'm just gonna wait for this dump truck that needs a new exhaust or something to pass by. The MWRA topic about hooking into MWRA, like what would be involved with that, what sort of cost, a time frame. I'm trying to understand it all. I know there were studies done, but they're not too recent, so I'm not sure how they actually apply to us now.
Let me go back a little bit. There's a state organization, which is the Department of Environmental Protection, and NWRA is a separate organization. It used to be, for some people who have been around for a while, the old MDC, Metropolitan District Commission. That deals with water coming from the Quabbin Reservoir, way up in the western part of the state, all the way down to, say, Stoughton, and there's a couple other cities to the east of us, I guess, that are using water from that system. Before Aquaria, there was a look to see if it made sense to connect into the MWRA, and at that time the closest connection would have been Stoughton. When we had the drought during the 80s, at one point there, it was DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, State Department, looked at our systems and how we draw water, etc., and said that the city of Brockton needed to have a second source of water. At the moment, we don't have what I consider to be a true second source of water, in that if we lost the lake, if the lake itself got fouled somehow, if we couldn't use the lake, never mind transmission lines or anything else, if the lake itself cannot be used for some reason, we do not have a second source at this point in time that would allow us to operate, putting, say, a minimum of about 9.5 million gallons a day, and we really need about, say, 10.5 from other sources that we could utilize. These reservoirs would dry up pretty quick. We've had wells in the past that in the city, most of those were fouled in the 70s and 80s and aren't usable at the moment. And if we had to spend money to maybe clean them up, to take the problem that keeps us from using them at the moment, it would be very, very expensive. So the city then decided that it made sense to deal with the aquarium. I won't go into all the history of that. If again, maybe another time we can talk about that and what happened with it. But the bottom line is the most important part of that plan is the permit to allow whoever is using that plant to take the water out of the Taunton River. The Taunton River is fed by the Atlantic Ocean. So you have an endless source of water. At the point that we are in Dighton, over there at the plant, and again, the plant doesn't belong to us, it belongs to an international corporation which is not here in the United States. In Aquaria, most people are aware of the name of it and have heard a lot about it. And I won't go into that either. But the bottom line is that we can draw at this point, about 4 million gallons a day out of it. It's probably would be pushing, I'd say comfortably probably about 3.8. There's also a transmission line from Dighton back here to Brockton, which we transmit the water that we purify from that plant. And when I say we, it's a combination of the contractor that we're hiring from in the city. And it has a 10-inch pipe, so that would give us our second source of water if we need that. And it's operating now, and it has been operating for years. So that would be if we could up the amount of water coming out of the Taunton River.
So my understanding is that the pipe has a capacity for 10 million.
Right.
The tanks only have about a capacity of 2.5 million gallons.
No, more than that. They could give us probably about 3.8, because that's the most we've drawn out of it at this point, continuous.
Well, from what I understand, they take the 2.5 each tide. It's either low tide. Do you know if it's low tide or high tide? I keep forgetting, so I don't want to say.
I think it's the low, if I remember correctly, but don't hold me to that one. I forget it.
So the tide, you take in 2.5, and then the next tide, there's 2 tides per day that they draw water. So that's 5 million gallons, throughout a day.
Right.
That's my understanding.
Right.
However, everything has to be full throttle, and I don't know if is 3.8 the most we've actually ever taken?
That's the most that we've taken at this point. There is a agreement with the city at this point for the amount of money that we could purchase that plant with now. With that, they talked about adding some additional pumps, which would take it up to the 5 or a little over 5 million gallons a day. It would call for some other things to happen. That's all part of the purchase of the plant. So we're not buying the plant as it is exactly. There's 2 other great things that's part of that instrument. One is that if there's any problems, there's money that's been put aside to fix those, as well as adding equipment to the plant prior to us taking full ownership of it. The second piece is for at least 2 years, and I believe that's the correct time, afterwards, if anything happens, there's money that's put aside again to repair any of the problems that it would be. So here you've got, you could also, you could say a 4-year, 2 years before and 2 years after, guarantee that at least the city itself wouldn't have to come out of pocket to do any repairs or any improvements to the system. Yep.
So one of the things, I have my own opinions. I'm not really I want to just get facts out there and go from there. I'm glad to see that the city's actually being proactive about this situation, and we're not, doing damage control at this point. The water issue is a serious one. Just look at Houston and well, that's more of a natural disaster situation. It could happen here in Puerto Rico and stuff. I don't think they're getting electricity till the beginning of the year, as it stands right now.
Well, you mentioned the water situation. LA would be a good example. Their aquifer was so low that they pretty much were restricted to the maximum as far as the use of water. People don't realize if a city doesn't have enough water, you have to shut the city down. Now that sounds strange. This city and most cities are not set up that you could turn off parts of the city and still operate, so that you could have your hospitals, say your fire hydrants, which would be for your fire safety, to put out fires, etc. We don't have the ability at this point in time to actually shut off parts, so you could operate that and operate the 2 hospitals we have and other facilities around the city that one would say that these are the priority places that we need to be. The schools would have to shut down. So any place that you really need, including homes, because there wouldn't be enough water even to come into homes. A lot of people don't realize around the world there are many countries, many towns and cities that they don't have total electricity every day, they don't have total water every day, and that's the way they live. We're lucky. We don't have that. We haven't had it for years. And usually if we have some catastrophe within a short amount of time, that's fixed. Puerto Rico, a little bit different. It's an island. It's an American city. its infrastructure was in trouble long before the hurricane came. So now they're trying to rebuild a total system down there since the whole thing just went kaput. That's horrible. Not having usable water and not having electricity. When in the last hurricane we had was 1991. It was the same year when the perfect storm happened. We just had a smaller version of that a few days ago, the perfect storm. The winds got up in a couple of southern areas up to about 95. A Category 1 hurricane, 74 miles per hour. So these are things that happen, and we have no control over them. Just like we don't have control over rain, which brings the water. Back to just one other thing, DEP. They put out what they call consent orders. The original consent order that we were under said we had to have that second source of water. What I felt that we needed to do was to really concentrate on that and make sure that this city had a second source of water if we lost the lake itself. Okay, and the losing of the lake at this point would only be, as we know it, would be because the lake becomes non-usable. It gets fouled to a point that we can't use it. We're not talking transmission lines. I think we have enough electrical power that we need, and backup power to keep everything going. We put that in place at all the plants. So we test those every once in a while. In fact, when we have large storms, a lot of times you don't know, we switch over to those and make sure they're working. And every time we've done that, you haven't noticed, you, the general public, have not noticed that we've done that. The water hasn't changed color, there's no different taste to the water, and there's no less water pressure in the city. But that's worked out. We've been doing that now for about 4 or 5 years when major catastrophes come up, and sometimes we just do it as a general test. The second thing, we have a second ACO that just came out, and in that it talks about if we, the city of Brockton, are using a second source of water, which is Aquaria at this point, we cannot tie into MWRA. That's a whole other watershed, and that's the state telling us they would not give us a permit, they would not allow us to do that. So we are, at this point, have to concentrate on what water we have in this area. And Aquaria is perfect for one reason, that permit. That's what makes Aquaria valuable. If we couldn't use the Taunton River, it wouldn't make any sense. Now, people, whether it be political reasons, whether it be misunderstandings, not having the facts that they need, that facility, if needed, could give us the water we want. If we don't buy that facility, when the contract runs out, whoever buys that facility will have to buy water from them. And it's not at a extremely high cost now, but you can bet in another roughly 8 to 10 years, it will be. So either way, we're going to have to pay for water if we don't have our own source of water ourselves. And that's, again, something that people don't understand. So the second source of water, the consent order telling us that since we're using Aquaria at this point in time, we cannot tie into MWRA. They did come to the City Council a few months ago, gave us a presentation. With that, they said we'd have to come through, we can't come through Stoke, it's not large enough. We have to go through another place over by the Blue Hills coming along Route 28, and that would be expensive. We also know that it would take a number of years for the permitting, taking of land if need be. All those kinds of things take time. It's not something you can do in a year or two. And then the final construction and finally. So we might be talking anywhere from 10, maybe as far out as 20 years to really get water from MWRA if for some reason that was acceptable. But again, the Department of Environmental Protection has said no to that. So unless that changes, that's where we're
So
at.
even though, like, in an emergency, they couldn't supply all the water?
No, in emergency, all these cities and towns, and we're one of them, would hook up fire hoses to hydrants in the closest place you can make hookups. And you use that for a short amount of time during the emergency while you're trying to fix whatever the problem is. And we've done that.
What's the longest we've been without water since you can remember? like from Silver, our main source, where we had to go in emergency?
Actually, we haven't had any that we haven't truly not had water. The break that we had in Bridgewater, I think that was 2 years ago now, we lucked out. That break happened early in the morning, like around 4:30, I think it was 4:30 a.m. All our tanks were full, all the reservoirs were filled, and we had to shut down the pipe at that point to repair it. It's a very large pipe. We had a particular valve that was giving us trouble, and we had trouble finding that, but we lucked out. We were able to get that also. So we actually never were without water. There were a few areas around the city because we were running lower than usual that were having a little bit of problem with water, but we never totally had shut down. So within 24 hours, we were back full operation without any problem whatsoever.
Well, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for your voice. This
Right.
was very informative.
And I hope the people in the city understand this. This is not about people making money. This is about us having water. Any one of us that have had problems in our homes or any places that you've been where there have been breaks and you're out of water for a couple of days, you know what that means. So that's what we're trying to do at this point in time. Thank you.
Take care.